I'm Mira Thompson, 33 years old, freelance journalist, divorced, mother of one brilliant, stubborn, hilarious 7-year-old girl named Lana. And last month, for reasons I still don't fully understand, I took her back to the one place I swore I'd never return, the Thompson family lake house. The place where my voice first cracked, where silence was currency and pain was served between the mashed potatoes and fake compliments. If you've ever found yourself standing at the edge of a family reunion, wondering whether you're about to reconnect or get emotionally mugged all over again, welcome. Pull up a chair. It started with a letter. Yes, a real one, handwritten blue ink on thick linen paper. No return address, but I'd recognize my mother's handwriting anywhere. Curled, elegant, always underlined twice. The envelope smelled faintly of her perfume, gardenia, and manipulation. Inside was a single sentence. For Lana's sake, we hope you'll reconsider attending the 70th anniversary weekend. No apology, no, how are you? Just a demand dressed up as an invitation. I remember sitting at my kitchen table in Chicago, holding that letter like it might burn me. Lana was doing her math homework nearby, tongue poking from the corner of her mouth. Mom, what's 81 divided by 9? She asked without looking up. 9, I said, distracted. Same as the number of years it's been since we saw Grandma Irene. We haven't seen her since I was born. Lana blinked at me. I've never met her. That stung. She was right. And I'd been proud of that fact. But now, Lana was asking questions about Grandpa Greg and Uncle Darren, names she only knew from whispered bedtime dodges. It's hard to shield a child from something they've never seen, and harder when they start to wonder if they've missed out on something magical. You always say family's complicated, she told me one night, curled in bed. But what if mine's not scary? What if they're just old? I should have shut it down right there. But instead, I made the first mistake. I let doubt speak louder than instinct. A week later, we were driving through the Pennsylvania countryside, fields blurred by in mustard yellows and muddy greens. Lana was humming a song from her school choir concert, all off-key confidence and joy. I wanted to memorize the sound before it got swallowed by what I knew was coming. As we pulled up to the lake house, the original Thompson estate built in 1952, all stone and stern windows, I felt my stomach curl. The air even smelled the same. Damp pine gasoline from the boat shed and something sour underneath. The past. Irene opened the door with her signature half smile, all teeth and no warmth. She hugged Lana like a porcelain doll, stiff and overly performative. What a lovely child. And so tall for 7. She turned to me without missing a beat. You look thinner. Are you sleeping? Gregory emerged from the back, arms wide, as if he'd been waiting decades to perform this moment. Mira, finally come home. He pulled me into a hug I didn't return. I could feel the question on his breath. Are you still the problem? Then came Darren, my brother, Captain Golden Boy. Still with the same varsity grin he wore in high school, now dimmed slightly by the fine lines of time and the scandals he assumed no one remembered. He knelt to meet Lana. Hey kiddo, I'm Uncle Darren. Heard you like to sing. Want to do a little performance for the family this weekend. Lana giggled. Only if you dance. I wanted to snatch her away right then, tuck her behind me like a shield. But I didn't. Because part of me, the part still aching for approval, I claimed not to need thought. Maybe this time, it would be different. The lake house had been renovated since I'd last seen it, but the ghosts knew their corners. I saw them in the refurbished dining room, the same place I once spilled cranberry sauce and was accused of ruining Thanksgiving. I heard them in the squeak of the floorboard by the pantry where I used to sneak crackers because I wasn't allowed snacks past 7 p.m. Discipline, they called it, but I called it learning hunger in more ways than one. Lana adapted quickly, too quickly. She bonded with my cousin Rachel, who had returned for the event as well, soft-spoken, always filming everything with her handheld Sony camcorder. She said it was for a personal documentary on family memory, but the way she lingered on silent moments made me suspect something deeper. That first night over dinner, I realized I'd underestimated just how much the Thompson machinery had learned to polish its rust. Darren toasted to healing and history, and Irene cried silent tears that landed perfectly between her linen napkin folds. But then Greg said something that snapped the air. Let's make sure this little one. He nodded to Lana, gets to grow up with the family values Mira never appreciated. I froze. Lana looked at me. I smiled too tightly. Can I be excused? She asked softly. I nodded. Later, as I tucked her into the upstairs guest room, she whispered, Why does Grandpa say weird things? I tried to laugh it off. He's just old-fashioned. But inside something cold settled in my chest. I thought I could stay for 3 days. I thought I could endure their stares, their microaggressions, their concerned comments masked as kindness. But that night, as I stood by the lake alone, watching the reflection of the old dock sway in the black water, I heard a voice behind me. "You should have never brought her here." It was Rachel. She stood in the dark, her camera pointed down. "You think they've changed, but they haven't. I have tapes." I turned to her, heart slamming against my ribs. Tapes of what? She hesitated, then said one word that would unravel everything. "Lana." Rachel's word hung in the air like smoke. Lana. For a moment, everything else, the wind rustling through the trees, the low murmur of cicadas, even the light from the house seemed to fade into a silent tunnel. I turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "What do you mean you have tapes of Lana?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she lifted her camera bag onto the railing of the deck, unzipped it, and pulled out a tiny black memory card in a clear case. "You need to see this," she said, her voice flat but shaking underneath. "But not here, not with them so close." We slipped around the side of the lake house like teenagers breaking curfew, Rachel leading me toward the old gardener's shed that had been converted into a studio years ago. She unlocked it with a key she claimed to have borrowed from Gregory's drawer. Inside, the air was warm and dry, tinged with varnish and cedar. A small projector sat on a desk next to a laptop. Cables sprawled like veins across the wooden floor. Rachel slipped the card into her device and hit play. The screen lit up. There was Lana in the backyard standing near the rose garden. Darren loomed nearby, holding a stick, a croquet mallet, tapping it against his shoe like he was bored. His tone was playful on the surface, but something in his stance, the tightness of his jaw, told another story. "If you want to be part of this family," he said, "you gotta toughen up, cupcake. None of this 'I'm tired' crap." Lana shifted, visibly uncomfortable. "I don't want to play anymore," she said. Darren's laugh was low and sharp. "Too bad. The game's not over till I say it is." Then he took a step forward, just one, but fast enough to make her flinch. I reached forward and slammed the laptop shut. My hands were shaking. "When was that taken?" I demanded. Rachel blinked. "Yesterday morning. Before breakfast. They were supposed to be setting up chairs. I could barely breathe. I wanted to scream, cry, hit something. But mostly I wanted to run upstairs and wrap my daughter in my arms like bubble wrap." "Why didn't you stop him?" I whispered. "Because if I had," Rachel said, eyes suddenly fierce, "you wouldn't believe me. But now you'll have proof. And so will anyone else who needs it." There was a long silence. I stared at her, trying to read her face. She looked tired, no hunted. And suddenly, I remembered Rachel had vanished from the family when she was 15. Everyone said she went to live with her mother's cousin out west. But what if that wasn't the whole story? "What did they do to you?" I asked quietly. She smiled, but it was hollow. "Let's just say, you and I have more in common than you think." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the guest room beside Lana, watching her chest rise and fall. Her arm was curled under her cheek fingers, still sticky with marshmallow from the evening's forced family bonfire. I kissed her hair and whispered promises I wasn't yet sure how to keep. In my head, questions spiraled. Should I confront Darren now? Should I leave? Should I call Jade? Was I overreacting? But no, Rachel's footage had made one thing crystal clear. My instincts hadn't lied to me. I'd just chosen to ignore them. The next morning, I acted like everything was normal. I dressed Lana in her yellow sundress and braided her hair while she recited her favorite knock-knock jokes. At breakfast, Darren clapped me on the shoulder like we were buddies. "Didn't think you'd make it this far, sis?" He grinned. "Thought you'd run after day one." "Guess I'm tougher than I look," I replied, matching his tone. Rachel avoided eye contact all morning, but before lunch, she slipped me a folded note. It had one line. "He hurt someone before. I have that on tape too." My blood turned to ice. Who? When? Why hadn't this come out earlier? But something told me Rachel was playing the long game. She wasn't just collecting footage for her own revenge. She was building a record, a reckoning. The day passed in a blur of fake smiles, clinking glasses, and subtle jabs disguised as banter. I tried to stay close to Lana, but the family had arranged for the kids to play lawn games while the adults mingled. I told her to stay where I could see her. But then Rachel pulled me aside. "I need to show you the other video," she said. "Now." We went back to the shed. This time the footage was older, grainier, a home video from at least 5 years ago. The backyard looked different, the trees shorter. A teenage girl stood in the corner, maybe 13, thin and anxious. Darren then, in his late 20s, was standing behind her, holding her shoulders. "Stand up straight," he barked. "You're making us look bad." The girl flinched. He squeezed harder. "You're not gonna cry, are you?" "Because Thompson girls don't cry." I stared. "Who is she?" Rachel didn't answer. I turned to her, my voice breaking. "Rachel, who is that?" She inhaled slowly, then let the words fall like stones. "Me." Suddenly, everything made sense. The vanishing, the fear, the silence. Rachel had been the family's original scapegoat, just like me. Just like my daughter could become. Unless I did something. I walked out of that shed with fire in my chest. For years, I'd swallowed my anger to keep the peace to avoid the dramatic label they all loved to pin on me. But now, they'd come for my daughter, and I had receipts. The final twist came as we returned to the house and saw Lana sitting quietly on the steps, her eyes wide, her dress stained with something dark. I ran to her. "What happened?" She didn't speak, just held up her arm. A shallow scratch ran from her elbow to her wrist. "I tripped," she mumbled too fast. "Uncle Darren says I should be more careful." Something inside me broke, and then came the voice I least wanted to hear. "Oh, come on," Irene called from the porch. "She's fine. Kids fall. Don't be dramatic, Mira." I stood up, eyes locking on my mother. "You think this is about a fall," I said, low and clear. "You have no idea what's coming." I didn't say another word to Irene, not then. I just scooped Lana into my arms, walked past the entire family as they sipped lemonade and swapped golf stories like nothing was wrong, and carried my daughter upstairs. I cleaned her scratch, kissed her forehead, and told her we might be leaving soon. She nodded quiet, but not scared, just tired in a way that broke me more than anything else. When she finally fell asleep, I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her breathe. My hands curled into fists. Not out of rage, at least not anymore, but something colder, sharper. The rage had passed. Now there was only focus. I'd given them a chance to act like family. They failed. Now it was my turn. I called Jade. Her voice came on sharp and clear. "Mira." It had been months since we last spoke. Work time zones, motherhood, fatigue, but hearing her voice felt like putting on armor I didn't know I still owned. "Hey," I whispered. "I need you." She didn't hesitate. "Where are you?" I told her everything. The video of Darren the scratch, the old tape of Rachel as a teen. "And you're still in the house?" she asked. "For now," I said. "But I won't be for long. I need to make sure when I leave they're not the ones holding the story." Jade didn't lecture me. She didn't panic. She just said, "Send me the tapes, tonight. I'll handle the legal protocols. But Mira, if you want to do this the right way, you need witnesses. People to see them for who they really are." That's when the plan began. I met Rachel outside again this time, under the pergola that our grandfather built after the war. I remember being a kid and watching him stain the beams himself. Now the wood was weathered ivy, creeping up its sides like the secrets this family buried. "You up for this?" I asked her. She didn't blink. "I've waited 15 years. Together we cataloged everything, the video from the garden, the older tape timestamps, transcripts. Rachel had backups, on drives on the cloud, even on an encrypted link that would go public if anything ever happened to her. She wasn't just a survivor, she was strategic. I told her Jade was in, that we weren't just going to expose Darren, we were going to take the whole rotten foundation down. The next morning was the big event, the 70th anniversary celebration of the Thompson legacy. An outdoor brunch beneath a massive white tent, catered by a local farm-to-table chef with gold-embossed menus and signature cocktails named after deceased ancestors. The family had pulled out all the stops, as they always did when image was at stake. Gregory was scheduled to give a keynote speech titled Honor, Heritage, and Hard Work. I nearly laughed when I read the program. Irene was managing the seating chart like a political campaign manager. Darren, of course, was scheduled to receive a community mentor award because apparently having a coaching certification and a family last name now qualified as sainthood. I kept my cool all morning, smiled for photos, complimented aunts I didn't trust, let Lana braid a daisy chain for her hair while Rachel filmed B-roll of the event. Nobody noticed that every camera was actually capturing something else entirely. 10 minutes before the speeches, I slipped away and found the sound tech under the tent. His name was Kyle, barely 21, and blessedly oblivious. I handed him a USB and said, "Hey, this is the intro video for the keynote. Family tradition." I smiled. "Play it exactly when Gregory gets to the mic, okay?" He nodded. "Got it." Rachel gave me a small nod from across the lawn. Jade texted, "I've reviewed the files. Legal holds are ready. Do your thing." When Gregory stepped up to the podium, Lana sitting cross-legged on the grass beside the other kids, Irene smiling like a matriarch in a Hallmark ad, Kyle hit play. At first, people thought it was part of the tribute. There was a soft fade-in piano, music black and white footage of the old lake house in the 60s. But then came the timestamp, yesterday 9:56 a.m. The video of Darren began. Clear audio, croquet mallet, Lana's voice. "I don't want to play anymore." The crowd stilled. Gregory turned. "What is?" But it kept going. Darren's tone, his movement her flinch. Gasps rippled through the tent. Someone stood up. "Is that real?" Another. "Is that Lana?" Irene's face drained of color. Gregory tried to wave it off. "This is some sort of..." But then came the second video. Rachel as a teenager. The hands on her shoulders. Darren's voice. "Thompson girls, don't cry." It played in dead silence. When the screen finally faded to black, the only sound was Lana whispering to another child, "That's my uncle. He yelled at me too." Rachel stepped forward, camera still rolling. "You built your legacy on fear, on control, on silence. Not anymore." Gregory tried to retake the mic. "We have children here. This is not the time." I stepped forward, slow and steady. "No, Greg. This is exactly the time. Because those children are watching, and they deserve to know the truth about the names they were told to be proud of." Darren had disappeared. Sometime during the footage, he'd slipped out the side of the tent. Cowardice meet karma. Rachel turned to the crowd. "There are more tapes, more stories. Some are mine, some belong to others you've tried to forget, but they're coming forward now." And then Jade's voice rang out on speakerphone, piped through Rachel's camera mic. "This is attorney Jade Sullivan. As of this moment, a formal investigation has been launched into Mr. Darren Thompson under federal child safety statutes. Anyone with information may contact my office directly." The gasps turned into stunned silence. Irene fainted. And Lena, my brave, bright daughter, stood up, took my hand, and whispered, "Can we go now?" We walked out together past the fallen champagne glasses, the stunned faces, and the wreckage of a legacy built on silence. But just as we reached the gravel path to the parking lot, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, text message. "You don't know everything. Some of us stayed quiet for a reason. If you keep digging, someone will get hurt." I showed Rachel. She read it twice, then looked at me and said, "Well, looks like we've only just begun." The drive back to the inn was silent. Lana sat in the back seat, clutching her daisy chain, her fingers absently unraveling it, petal by petal. I wanted to ask her how she felt, if she was scared, confused, proud, but I knew from her face that she was still swimming through it all. I was too. My hands shook at stoplights, not from fear, from adrenaline, from the high-wire act we'd just pulled off, from the message still burned into my screen, "If you keep digging, someone will get hurt." Rachel and I stayed up that night in the dim light of the inn's kitchenette, huddled around her laptop with mugs of black tea gone cold. We traced the number that had sent the threat. Burner phone, unregistered, classic. But then Rachel did something I hadn't expected. She opened a hidden folder on her drive labeled Thompson Archives. Inside were video files, dozens, some labeled only with dates. "I never stopped recording," she said quietly, "even after they sent me away, especially after." One video caught my eye, dated 8 years ago. It showed Gregory in a small office, his real estate firm's downtown location. Across the desk was a young man, maybe 19, maybe younger, nervous, sweaty palms tapping a foot under the chair. Gregory leaned in, voice low. "You understand what's at stake here. You get a clean record, a bonus, and we call it even. But if you talk..." The screen cut out. "That was a high school intern," Rachel explained. "He caught Darren roughing up a kid at a youth football practice. They paid him to keep it quiet." I stared at the screen. "Why didn't you go public?" Then Rachel met my eyes. "Because I had no backup. No one would believe the girl who got sent away for acting out. But now they have to." The next morning, I met Jade at the coffee shop near the courthouse. She'd taken a red-eye in from D.C., briefcase in hand, eyes sharp as a blade. "We've got traction," she said, sliding her phone across the table. News headlines were already swirling. Prominent coach under fire after disturbing footage surfaces. Thompson family celebration. Ends in scandal. My inbox had exploded with interview requests. But none of that mattered more than what Jade said next. "The licensing board is opening a formal case. Darren's been temporarily suspended." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "What about Lana?" I asked. Is she protected legally? Jade nodded. We filed a protective order this morning. He can't be within 500 feet of either of you. Relief, yes, but also something colder, the awareness that this wasn't over. We'd shaken a tree with deep rotting roots, and not everything that falls is fruit. Back at the inn, I found a note slipped under our door. Thick paper, familiar handwriting. Irene, of course. Mira, this doesn't have to be how it ends. You've made your point. Let's talk. Just us. It wasn't a peace offering. It was bait. Rachel didn't want me to go. She's covering for someone she said, probably herself. But I needed to look Irene in the eye, one more time, not for closure, for clarity. We met at the greenhouse behind the estate, the only place she ever really let her guard down. She stood among the orchids in a silk scarf and sunglasses despite the overcast sky. You've embarrassed this family, she began. But more than that, you've broken something sacred. I leaned against the doorframe. You mean the silence. She inhaled through her nose like she could still control the narrative by sheer posture. You always were difficult, sensitive, emotional. No, I said, I was the only one telling the truth. She stepped forward. You think this legacy will fall apart because of a video, because of some dramatics at brunch. I didn't flinch. No, it's falling apart because of decades of abuse that everyone in this family either ignored or protected. Her jaw twitched. That was her tell. Always had been. Then she said something that chilled me deeper than any threat. You're not the first to threaten us, Mira. But the last one didn't have a child to lose. I stepped back. Is that a threat? It's a reminder, she said, her tone syrupy sweet. You're playing with people who've survived much worse than bad PR. I left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me scared. But my mind was racing. If someone else had come before, who Rachel the intern, or someone we hadn't discovered yet. That night, Rachel and I scoured the archives. We found a name, Emily Kincaid. It was buried in an old email thread between Gregory and Irene dated 10 years ago. Emily's refusing to sign. She says she's reporting Darren regardless. If she does, we're exposed. Shut it down. Rachel paused the screen. She was a nanny, hired one summer, gone by fall. I grabbed my phone, Googled. Nothing. No LinkedIn, no social presence, just a single-hit obituary. Emily Kincaid, 27, died in a car accident. No foul play suspected. I stared at the screen. Cold, heavy, my stomach turned. We need to find her family, I said. Rachel looked at me. Are you sure you want to keep going? I nodded. I don't want to, but I have to. Because if Emily tried to speak and ended up dead, then Lana wasn't just in danger of being emotionally scarred. She was in danger, period. We found Emily Kincaid's mother in a small town outside Scranton. Her name was June, and she lived in a weathered blue house with peeling paint and wind chimes that sang a sad little song when we walked up the porch steps. I introduced myself, told her I had questions about Emily, and expected the door to close. Instead, she stepped aside and said, I was wondering when someone like you might show up. Her living room smelled of cinnamon and loss. There were framed photos of Emily everywhere, smiling on a beach, holding a violin, wearing a graduation cap, a girl frozen in her prime. We sat down, and she poured tea that neither of us drank. Emily worked for your family one summer, she said. Said the money was good and she liked the lake. But when she came back, something was wrong. She didn't smile the same. I waited. She told me Darren was inappropriate, June continued. Said he would accidentally walk into her room, make comments, try to touch her lower back. Said one night he followed her down to the dock. Her voice cracked. She wrote a letter. Said she was going to file a report, that she wasn't going to let it slide. And then the accident, I asked gently. June nodded. Car lost control on the back road. No tire marks, no alcohol, no drugs. The police said she might have fallen asleep. But Emily never drove tired. She was meticulous. I looked at Rachel, who was already scrolling through her files. You said she wrote a letter. June stood slowly and walked into the other room. When she came back, she handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a copy of the letter, typed, signed, addressed to a local attorney, and never sent. We left in silence. The weight of Emily's ghost followed us to the car. Rachel finally spoke. They silenced her. You know that, right? I know, I said, and now we speak for her. That afternoon, we met Jade in person again. She read the letter 3 times before setting it down. We can open a wrongful death inquiry, she said, but it'll be uphill. Statute of limitations, lack of physical evidence. It's not a win in court, but it's a statement. Then she looked at me. Mira, what do you want? It was a simple question, but one that sat in my gut like a stone. I didn't want revenge. Not really. I wanted safety. For Lana, for the next Emily, for the next Rachel. I wanted a world where girls didn't have to grow up learning how to smile without inviting danger. Where secrets weren't protected by legacy and last names. I want them to be afraid, I finally said, the way we were. Jade nodded once. Then let's make them sweat. The next few days were a blur of movement. Rachel and I started contacting former staff interns, volunteers, anyone who had worked for the Thompsons in the last 20 years. Some ignored us. A few cursed us out. But others had stories. One woman said Gregory offered her hush money after she caught Darren with a student in his car after hours. A man said he was blacklisted from youth coaching after reporting inappropriate discipline. Piece by piece, we built a wall of truth. But the Thompsons weren't standing still. Darren's lawyer issued a statement denying any and all baseless accusations, calling the footage heavily edited and taken out of context. Gregory launched a PR campaign. Irene, through a proxy of course, contacted a family friend at a conservative media outlet spinning the entire scandal as a witch hunt fueled by jealousy. We were fighting money legacy and a machine built to survive scandal. Then came the call, from a blocked number. Rachel answered and the color drained from her face. She handed me the phone, shaking. Mira, the voice rasped. Male, measured, unfamiliar. You need to stop. You're dragging people into things they buried for good reason. I stayed silent. You think exposing a few skeletons makes you brave? But families like yours, we clean up our messes. You're playing with things that don't belong to you. I'm playing with the truth, I said calmly. There was a pause, then a chuckle. Truth gets buried all the time. Ask Emily. I hung up. That night we moved to a different hotel. Lana had started having nightmares, waking up sweaty crying for me, even though I was right beside her. I hated that my fight had become her fear, but I also knew there was no turning back. We were past the point of safety. Then came the biggest break. Rachel, digging through public records, found an old deposition buried in a sealed court file from 2007. It was related to an assault case that never made it to trial. The witness, a teenage girl. The accused, Darren Thompson. But here's the twist: the statement had been dismissed due to lack of cooperation. We tracked the girl down. Her name was Alyssa. She was 30 now, living in Oregon, working as a social worker. I called, introduced myself, told her what we were doing. She didn't hang up. She cried, and then she said, it wasn't lack of cooperation, it was fear. They threatened my mother's job, told us we'd be sued for defamation. I was 16. I didn't know what to do. I asked her softly, would you be willing to share your story now? A long pause. Then yes, but only if I'm not alone. You won't be. And as I hung up, I looked at Rachel, who looked right back. We weren't just building a case anymore. We were building an army. Alyssa arrived on a Thursday. She stepped off the train with a small duffel bag, oversized sunglasses, and that kind of posture women learn after surviving men like Darren, upright, alert, but never fully at ease. We hugged like old friends, though we'd only ever spoken through screens and broken memories. When she saw Rachel, her voice caught. I saw your video, she said softly. I thought I was alone. Rachel nodded, her face tense with something deeper than sadness. We all did. Jade arranged a private room for us at the legal aid office. Nothing fancy, just a desk, 2 chairs, a box of tissues, and a digital recorder. Alyssa gave her statement under oath. Her words weren't loud, but they were sharp enough to gut every illusion the Thompsons had ever sold about themselves. She spoke of the grooming, the threats the moment Darren slammed her against a locker and whispered, no one will believe you. I'm a Thompson. She had dates, emails, a copy of the police report with her redacted name. It wasn't enough to jail him outright, but it filled the gaps in the timeline Rachel and I had pieced together. Jade leaned back after it ended and said, this changes everything. By the next morning, a formal press conference was scheduled. Alyssa agreed to speak. So did Rachel. And to my surprise, so did June Emily Kincaid's mother. I want them to see her face again, she said, to know what they stole. Jade prepped everyone, but she warned me, you'll be targeted now more than ever. They won't let this go quietly. Sure enough, an hour before the event, my phone rang. No caller ID. This time I answered on speaker with Rachel recording. You're going to destroy lives, Mira. A woman's voice said, smooth, cultured, Irene. You've made your point. We'll pay. Just don't drag the whole family through the mud. You mean the mud you buried everyone else in? I replied. Think of Lana, she snapped. What kind of mother involves her child in a media circus? I felt the words rise sharp and certain. The kind who doesn't let her daughter grow up thinking monsters wear medals. I hung up. At the press conference, the room was packed. Local reporters, advocacy groups, even a few former Thompson staff members I hadn't seen in years. Alyssa stood first hands, trembling voice steady. She told her truth in front of cameras. Rachel followed her face, pale but resolute. Then June. She held up Emily's photo, looked straight into the crowd, and said, "They erased my daughter, but not anymore." By the time I stepped to the podium, my heart felt like it was punching through my ribs. I didn't prepare a speech. I just told them about Lana, about the lake house, about a family that built its legacy on silence. This isn't just about the Thompsons, I said. It's about what happens when power meets protection, when abusers are shielded because they coach a winning team or make big donations. That stops now. The footage went viral in less than 12 hours. Networks picked it up. Hashtags started trending. People shared their own stories. Survivors emailed Rachel and Jade nonstop. It wasn't just a case anymore. It was a movement. But with movement comes backlash. That night, our hotel room was broken into. Nothing stolen, just drawers overturned, our documents scattered like confetti. On the mirror, someone had written in red lipstick, "This is your last warning." Lana wasn't in the room when it happened, thank God. She was asleep in Jade's suite down the hall. But I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the message, and for the first time since this began, I felt fear crawl back into my throat. "We need protection," Rachel whispered. "We need to finish this," I said. The next morning, I filed a motion to unseal the 2007 case file. Jade handled the paperwork. Rachel leaked Darren's youth coaching suspension to a national outlet. Alyssa was contacted by a federal investigator. And then, we heard the biggest news yet. The district attorney was considering criminal charges based on the compiled testimonies. But something felt off, quiet, too quiet. That night, Lana came into my room and said, "Mom, why is Uncle Darren in the hotel lobby?" I froze. I ran barefoot down the hallway. But by the time I got to the lobby, he was gone. No camera caught him. No clerk remembered seeing him. But Lana didn't lie. And neither did the crumpled wrapper she found tucked into the planter by the elevator, the same mints Darren always carried. They weren't playing defense anymore. They were hunting. I texted Jade, "We need to disappear for a bit." She agreed. But just as I started packing, a knock came at the door. 3 slow raps, then silence. Rachel opened it, and standing there soaked from the rain was a woman we didn't recognize. Early 40s, shaking, pale. She held out a flash drive and said one thing: "This proves everything, but it doesn't end how you think." The woman's hands were trembling as she stepped inside, soaking the hotel carpet. Rain clung to her lashes. Her coat, even the edges of the flash drive she held out like a lifeline. "You don't know me," she said, "but I knew Emily, and Rachel, and Darren." Her voice cracked on his name like it tasted bitter. We pulled her into the kitchenette and gave her a towel. Rachel's eyes never left her face. "What's your name?" I asked. "Claire," she whispered. "Claire Martinez. I was a housekeeper at the lake house, summer of 2015. She wouldn't sit. She stood by the window like she needed to know where the exits were. I saw things she said, things no one should see. They thought I was invisible. Hired help immigrant, barely spoke English. But I kept records, voice memos, photos, journals. Darren wasn't just cruel to the kids. He was violent. Once he grabbed a teenage boy by the throat for tracking mud through the kitchen, called it discipline. Rachel's breath hitched. "What happened to the boy?" Claire looked down. "They paid his mother off, gave her a scholarship fund, and made her sign an NDA. Rachel stepped forward. Why now? Claire didn't answer right away. She pulled a pendant from around her neck and opened it. Inside was a tiny picture of a little girl. "That's my daughter," she said. "She's 8. And last week, Darren Thompson showed up at the after-school center where she plays piano." My stomach twisted. He approached her. Claire nodded, didn't touch her, just watched, smiling, like he wanted me to know he could. That's when she handed us the flash drive. "Everything's on here. But I have one condition. If anything happens to me, you make it public. All of it." Rachel nodded slowly. "We will." We plugged the drive in and scrolled. Dozens of voice memos, covert phone recordings of Darren bragging about breaking kids into shape, photos of bruises, transcripts of conversations between Gregory and Irene, coordinating payoffs, sealing files, even references to removing threats quietly. It wasn't just a trail, it was a map of decades of rot. Jade arrived within the hour. She scanned the files, her face stony. "We take this to the DA. Tomorrow." "What about Claire?" I asked. "We'll file for emergency protection. Her daughter, too." But the part that shook me most one voice memo buried halfway through the folder. Darren's voice. If Mira keeps pushing, we remind her about her father. We remind her how this family really protects its own. I froze. My father died when I was 13, I said. Heart attack. Claire looked at me. That's what they said about Emily's uncle, too. The one who tried to press charges in '92. I pulled out my own family files, photos, letters, a worn autopsy report I hadn't read in years. And right there, scrawled in tiny handwriting, cause of death, undetermined cardiac trauma. Possible blunt force to chest accidental fall not ruled out. My hands went numb. They didn't just protect Darren, I whispered. They've been doing this for generations. Jade's eyes narrowed. We're not just dealing with abuse. This is a criminal network disguised as a legacy. The plan moved fast. We coordinated with the DA, arranged a sealed deposition, reached out to advocacy groups. By morning, the Thompson estate was swarming with federal investigators. News helicopters hovered above the lake house. Irene issued a press release begging for privacy during this family's trying time. Gregory was photographed entering a black sedan with his lawyer, but Darren gone. Vanished. His car was found abandoned 20 miles out, engine cold, the trunk dusted with old pine needles. No wallet, no phone, just a single item in the driver's seat, a Polaroid photo. Emily, age 20, standing by the lake. Someone had drawn an X over her face. We were too late, or maybe just one step behind. The press dubbed it the Thompson Unraveling. Lawsuits mounted, donors pulled out. The youth football program was suspended indefinitely. Rachel's footage became the centerpiece of a national documentary. Alyssa and Claire both testified in court. June started a foundation in Emily's name. I returned home with Lana, who now slept soundly through the night, but held my hand tighter when we crossed the street. One evening, Rachel and I sat on my porch watching the sky turn copper. "Do you think he's still out there?" she asked. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. We both knew the truth. Darren had vanished the same way men like him always do, into the shadows of privilege and apathy. But that didn't mean we'd stop. The last twist came on a Sunday. I opened my mailbox and found a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photo Darren sitting in, what looked like a cafe, tropical trees in the background. He was smiling. And beneath the photo, in block letters, "You exposed a monster, but you never saw the king." Story 2. The moment I woke up that morning, something felt wrong. The sunlight cut through my blinds like an accusation. My t-shirt itched against my skin, and when I reached up, my fingers brushed against something wet and sticky. I froze. Across my forehead in shaky cobalt blue lines, someone had tattooed the word useless. My breath caught. The raised ink stung under my fingertips. Before I could scream, the door burst open. Chloe, my sister, stepped in, phone in hand, recording. Her strawberry blonde ponytail was perfect. "Well, look who's finally awake," she sneered. "Hey guys, hit like if you think Mallerie needed this makeover. Drop your city in the comments." My heart pounded. "What did you do?" I choked out. Chloe rolled her eyes. "Mom and I decided your diary wasn't dramatic enough. Now your real story's inked on your face." Down the hallway came our mother's voice. Smooth, cold. "Chloe, show her the mirror. She needs to see her truth." Her lips twitched as she held up her phone's front camera. On the screen, my private journal lay, open pages stained with coffee rings, poems full of hope. And there in my own handwriting style, the fresh tattoo on my skin. My mother, Linda Harper, once a ballet instructor, now the picture of control in her tailored blazer, walked in, chamomile tea in hand. She set it on my nightstand and smiled. "Maybe now the neighbors will stop feeling sorry for you. No job, no drive, no prospects. At least your forehead tells the truth." She sipped. I fled to the bathroom, slammed the door, and collapsed on the cool tile. I stared at the mirror, at that crude tattoo. The old Mallerie, the shy girl who never felt enough, welled up inside me. But then a quiet voice whispered, "Not today." I stood, grabbed rubbing alcohol and a scouring pad, and scrubbed until the scabs flaked away. My forehead burned, but the letters blurred. I looked at the bruise and felt something shift. By late morning, I stepped out without a cap. I booked my first laser removal session at a small clinic downtown. The tech warned me it'd take multiple visits, but said this was a start. My forehead tingled for hours. At noon, I slipped into a borrowed blouse and jeans that my friend Anna sent me. I walked for the first time under my own power to Maple and Ivy Books, an indie bookstore near the Clark Lake station. The manager, Elliot, asked why I covered the ink so soon. I met his gaze. Because your story isn't someone else's to write. He nodded, handed me a stack of hardcovers to shelve, and offered me the job. That evening, I caught a bus north to Willowbrook Women's Shelter in Evanston. The cot was narrow, but when the women there shared their breakfast muffins and stories, I realized I wasn't alone. I kept my head high, taped my resume to a clipboard, and applied for shifts at a local cafe and part-time social media gig for Anna's art shop. 6 months later, I stood in a bright room at Northside Community Center, clipboard in hand. The center coordinator looked relieved. "Thank you for leading our creative writing club, Mallerie." I swallowed and smiled at the dozen kids staring up at me. I read a line from a fictionalized diary entry about a girl marked by shame who finds her own voice and watched their eyes light up. Word spread quickly. I began speaking on a local podcast about reclaiming your story. Then the email came. Invitation Chicago. Women in Media Conference. Keynote speaker, Chloe Harper de Chiasse. 10th. My stomach clenched. Chloe would be on the same stage, selling her Empower Her brand. On the day of the conference, I skipped the glam squad. Jeans a white button down, and my forehead still faintly bruised from laser. I walked onto the polished stage right after Chloe's introduction. The chandelier's crystals caught the light on her designer dress. When it was my turn, I stood at the lectern. The crowd hushed. I cleared my throat. "I'm Mallerie Harper. You might know me as Chloe's sister, the one she branded for attention." A murmur. Behind me, slides appeared on the left. Chloe's viral TikToks mocking me. On the right, photos of my community workshop, kids smiling up at me. I paused. They thought shame would keep me silent. But stories don't fade like cheap tattoos. I tapped the screenshots of their cruel comments. This is real empowerment, naming your wound, owning your voice, and helping others do the same. Eyes widened. Chloe's smirk vanished. My mother in the front row sank into her chair. I closed with "Healing isn't a performance. It's walking on unbroken." Then I stepped off the stage. That evening, Chloe's keynote was canceled. Empower Her lost its sponsorship. Meanwhile, I was asked back for a panel as a survivor speaker. I used my honorarium to move into a tiny apartment above the bookstore. Every week I lead writing workshops. I see new faces, women tired of others writing their stories for them. On my living room wall hangs a framed photo of me on that conference stage, head held high. Below it, a simple plaque. Mallerie Harper, author of her own story. The moment I woke up, the room felt too bright, as though the morning sun had sharpened its edges just to remind me of everything I was about to face. My chest tightened and my skin prickled under the scratchy cotton of my t-shirt. I sat up, my heart racing, and when I reached up to rub away the last wisps of sleep, my fingers brushed something wet and sticky. I froze. Across my forehead in jagged cobalt blue ink was the word useless. My breath caught in my throat. The raised lines stung under my fingertips like someone had carved them into my skin while I slept. Before I could even scream, the door slammed open and Chloe stormed in her phone, already recording. Her strawberry blonde ponytail was perfect, not a hair out of place, and her green eyes flashed with triumph. "Well, would you look at that?" she said, her voice smooth and mocking. Mallerie Harper branded at last. Hit like if you think I did her a favor. Leave your city in comments. My vision blurred with tears, but I blinked them back. "What did you do?" I managed to choke out. Chloe rolled her eyes, took a step closer, and tapped her phone. "Mom and I decided your diary wasn't dramatic enough. Now your real story's inked where everyone can see." A new voice drifted in from the hallway, calm and chilling. "Chloe, show her the mirror. She needs to see her truth." It was Linda Harper, my mother, her heels clicking on the hardwood like a metronome set to humiliation. She glided in a chamomile latte in one hand, her designer blazer crisp and commanding. She set the cup on my nightstand and smiled, but her eyes were cold. "Maybe now the neighbors will stop feeling sorry for you. No job, no ambition, no future. At least your forehead finally tells the truth." She sipped. Chloe held out her phone, flipped to selfie mode, and showed me the live image, my private journal sprawled open on the kitchen counter. Coffee-ringed pages full of my fears, my poems, dreams of a real job, stray doodles of wings I wished I had. On each page, my handwriting blurred into smeared ink. And there on my forehead, the fresh tattoo spelled out their contempt. I felt the room spin. My legs gave way, and I stumbled back, clutching the bedpost until the world steadied. Their laughter followed me as I fled to the bathroom, slammed the door, locked it. I collapsed onto the cool tile, my tears finally falling, hissing on the porcelain. I stared at my reflection in the fogged mirror, the girl who'd always tried too hard to be enough now marked in the cruelest way possible. Every insult they'd ever hurled at me pulsed in those blue letters. I thought of the receptionist application waiting in my bag, the interview dress Chloe had thrown away the neighbors who asked when I'd move out and start my life. Rage boiled beneath my kneecap-deep despair. Then somehow, a small voice inside whispered, "Not today." I stood, wiped my tears, and reached for the bottle of rubbing alcohol Mom had bought last week for her rosacea, she said. The burn when I dabbed it on was savage each sting, a promise they thought this ink would break me, but I would make it bleed until it faded. Using a scouring pad, I scrubbed at the fresh ink until the scabs flaked away. My forehead burned bright red, but the letters began to blur. Edges softened, lines broke apart. I shut my eyes and breathed in the antiseptic smell. And when I opened them, I recognized a hardness in my gaze that wasn't there before. By late morning, I smoothed my hair back short now, where Chloe had hacked it last year, and stepped out without a cap. The winter air bit at my cheeks as I hailed a lift to a small clinic in downtown Chicago. Inside, the receptionist gave me a sympathetic look. "You booked for your first laser session?" she asked, tapping her keyboard. "It'll take at least 3 more before it's gone." I nodded, sliding onto the exam table. The technician's laser probe glowed cold blue as it hovered over my bruise. A flash of pain shot through me, and I clenched the edge of the table. When the stinging subsided, I lifted a hand to my throbbing forehead, and for the first time that morning, felt a flicker of control. I left the clinic clutching an ice pack, my heart echoing in my ears. I walked to the corner of Clark and Lake, where the red L train rumbled by, and hailed down a city bus heading north. The streets blurred past, bakeries offering egg sandwiches, dive bars opening for lunch, crowds, families bundled up against the wind. I thought of the little tabletop in my childhood bedroom, littered with journals and scented candles, before Chloe and Mom decided to burn my privacy down. Now, every step carried me farther from their binding expectations. That afternoon, I arrived at Maple and Ivy Books, an independent bookstore nestled in a brick row house with hand-painted window displays. Inside, the scent of old paper and fresh coffee mingled, and the manager Elliot greeted me with warm eyes. "You're Mallerie?" he asked, reaching out a hand. Behind him, shelves of dog-eared classics and local authors beckoned. I ran a fingertip along the spine of a Toni Morrison novel and met his gaze. "I'm here for the clerk position," I said. When he glanced at my forehead, still bruised but ink-broken, I added quietly, "Because your story isn't someone else's to write." He smiled and handed me a stack of books to shelve. Then I headed north again to the Willowbrook Women's Shelter in Evanston. The women there, soft-spoken, world-weary, offered me a thin blanket and a mug of hot cocoa. Over cinnamon-scented muffins, I listened to their tales of lost survival and small victories. I kept my voice low, my head lifted, and tucked my resume into a manila folder I'd carried like a shield. In that hall of shared stories, I realized I wasn't alone, and that my bruised forehead could still reflect strength, not shame. As dusk settled, I dragged my suitcase into a narrow cot by the window. My phone buzzed with Chloe's latest TikTok, her reenactment of that morning's attack, captioned "Sisters, bonding right, already racking up views." My mother's comment glowed beneath it. Finally, she learned her place. My hands shook, but I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a notes app and typed a single line. "Tomorrow, I reclaim my name." That night, I lay awake listening to the city hum beyond the shelter walls. I pictured the conference stage 6 months from now, where Chloe would strut with her "Empower," her banner, unaware of the storm gathering behind the curtain. My pulse quickened as I whispered into the darkness, "Let her watch me write my own ending." And in the hush before sleep, I knew they'd broken my skin, but not my spirit. Tomorrow the fight would really begin, and nothing would ever be the same. Cliffhanger. What plan would Mallerie hatch next, and how far would she go to reclaim her story? The next morning I woke before dawn, the bruise on my forehead throbbing like a warning bell. I wrapped a soft scarf around it, stained pale pink. Now the first layers of ink flaking off, and climbed off the cot at Willowbrook Shelter. The hall was hushed pale light, slipping through narrow windows. I tiptoed past sleeping women and gathered my things, the manila folder, with resumes, a battered journal, and a pen I'd taped to the cover like an exclamation point. Outside, the March air bit my cheeks. I pulled my thrift store coat tighter and walked 3 blocks to the bus stop, every step a reminder that I owned this morning, not Mom or Chloe. On the bus, I sank into a vinyl seat and watched blurred storefronts, a diner serving eggs and toast, a car wash where half-hearted flags snapped in the wind, a Nike outlet with a line already forming. The world went on, unaware of my little war. At Maple and Ivy Books, Elliot greeted me with a nod and a fresh stack of returned novels. Honey-colored morning light slanted through the front window, casting spines in gold. Morning Mallerie, ready for your shift. His tone was gentle, like handing a child a flower. I smiled and tucked a stray hair behind my ear, wincing at the dull ache where Chloe had hacked last year. Absolutely. As I reshelved a row of Toni Morrison paperbacks, The Bluest Eye Song of Solomon, I felt a flicker of belonging. Each spine whispered stories of survival, of voices that refused to be silenced. I promised myself I wouldn't go quiet again. But comfort can turn risky when the world expects you to stay small. Mid-afternoon, a woman in a fur-trimmed coat swept in clutching a phone. She tapped at her screen, then glared at me. "Is this where the new clerk with the forehead tattoo works?" A hush fell. Elliot froze behind his desk. My ribs went tight. I forced a polite nod. "Yes, ma'am," she sneered. I saw her on TikTok, pathetic. Someone should clean up this place. She stalked out heels, clicking like a judge's gavel. I pressed my back against the shelf and swallowed. I was here to rescue my story, not lose it to strangers' cruelty. That evening, I exited the bookstore and walked to the public library where I had arranged to volunteer. The building loomed with stone columns, an old institution like justice itself. Inside, librarians shelved encyclopedias that hadn't been opened in decades. I signed in Mallerie Harper, creative writing volunteer. The coordinator, Ms. Diaz, a soft-spoken woman with silver hair, handed me a stack of blank journals. "The kids will arrive in 20 minutes. They're mostly middle schoolers, girls who've faced homelessness, foster care, all that." I nodded, throat tight. I'd been them in a way marked cast aside, then taught to hide in silence. Not today. When the door swung open, 8 kids filed in, eyes wide. A lanky boy in a hoodie slunk to the back. 2 girls clasped hands by the window. I felt my pulse in my ears. I took a deep breath and met their gaze. "Hi, everyone. I'm Mallerie. These journals are yours. Think of them as a place where no one can tattoo your feelings." I held up mine. The others were plain, but mine was patched with bandages of colored tape. A girl with braids raised her hand. "Miss Mallerie, did you really have a tattoo here?" She pointed to my forehead. I nodded. "Yes." Someone wrote "useless." But I'm writing my own story now. I tapped the journal spine. "You can too." We spent the next hour writing prompts. If you were a bird, where would you fly? Describe the sound of your name. The room filled with pencil scratching paper, whispers of imagination breaking free. At one point, I read a line from my own fiction about a girl whose scars turned into constellations across her skin. The girl by the window wiped her lip. The boy in the hoodie sketched wings on the edge of his page. When time was up, Ms. Diaz gave me a nod. They loved it. I felt something settle in my chest, pride or maybe purpose. On my way out, I checked my phone. 2 missed calls from Anna, my best friend, and a text. "Check your email." I escaped into the night air, the city lights like distant promises. In a cafe on the corner, I opened my inbox, dozens of job alerts, but one subject line made my breath hitch. Volunteer coordinator position, Northside Community Center. Then another speaker. Invitation, Chicago Women's Empowerment Panel. My pulse jumped. I'd only just begun pulling my life back together. Could I stand on a stage and face more crowds? My hand trembled over accept. That night back at the shelter, I lay on the cot staring at the ceiling, the echo of the kids' laughter still ringing. I pressed my palms into my eyes and imagined what it would feel like to speak in front of strangers. Their faces blurred, my voice steady. The confession of my scars becoming my strength. But every triumph has its shadow. A late-night notification lit the screen. Chloe had posted again this time, putting my forehead removal photos next to her glamorous "I'm an influencer" shots captioned "glow up or breakdown." It already had thousands of likes. My chest tightened. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Let them watch." Because now I knew the fiercest battles happen in daylight in front of witnesses. I would show them not just how I reclaim my face, but how I reclaim my life one bold step at a time. And as sleep finally claimed me, I dreamed of a grand auditorium, a spotlight on 2 sisters at opposite ends of the stage, one shining with borrowed light, the other blazing with truth. Tomorrow, I'd stand in that light for real. But what would I say first, and who would be listening? The answer would change everything. The sun hadn't yet risen when I rolled out of bed in that tiny shelter room, the bruise on my forehead throbbing like a heartbeat of its own. I pressed a cool paper towel against it, then packed up my journal, its taped spine cracking as I opened it, along with a stack of resumes I'd printed at the library, and my lucky blue pen. Outside, the air was still and sharp, the city asleep, except for the distant rumble of a CTA train. I pulled my thrift store coat tighter around me and headed for the bus stop. By the time I stepped off at Clark and Lake, the Red L train's first cars were clattering past, carrying commuters to sunrise shifts. I navigated the familiar block to Maple and Ivy Books, my breath misting in front of me. Inside, Elliot was already at the counter, his warm smile a small beacon. "Morning, Mallerie," he said, handing me a steaming latte. "I've got the morning shift covered. Take your time with the writing club prep." I thanked him, savoring the cinnamon-sweet coffee. I ducked into a corner table, opened my journal, and reread yesterday's notes. Prompts for the kids. If you could change one thing about your story, what would it be? I underlined it twice. Then I flipped to my own draft speech for that evening's Empower. Her panel. "Your scars aren't weaknesses, they're the ink of your survival." I paused, pen hovering. The words felt powerful on paper. But would they land in a conference hall full of polished speakers? The morning passed in a blur of shelving, returned paperbacks, and restocking coffee mugs. A regular customer, Mrs. Patton, an elderly woman with kind eyes, stopped by and placed her hand on my arm. "You're doing wonderful work here, dear," she whispered. "We all need a little writing magic." Her gentle approval warmed me more than the latte. At noon, I hopped on the northbound bus and headed to Northside Community Center. Outside, a mural of children reading climbed the brick wall, vibrant blues and golds dancing beneath a sun they'd never see because of the cracked skylight. Inside, Ms. Diaz was waiting with a clipboard. "The kids will be here in 10, she said, cueing me into the main hall. Folding chairs were set in a semicircle around a low table. Blank journals lay stacked pens perched at each spot. When the door opened, 10 teenagers filed in, some shy, some sullen, all carrying backpacks worn thin at the straps. I stepped forward, heart pounding. "Hello, I'm Mallerie." I began, voice steady, even as my palms dampened. "This is your space to write your story. No judgments, only new beginnings." A lanky boy at the back twisted his cap in his hands, a girl with red braids perched on the edge of her seat. I smiled and handed out journals. We worked through the prompts. Write a letter to your future self. Draw the shape of your anger. Their pencils scratched ripped pages, left blotches of crayon. At one point, the red-braided girl looked up with tears shining. "I never thought anyone cared to hear my story," she whispered. My chest tightened. This was why I'd taken that first step out of the shelter. I nodded and said, "I do." After the session, Ms. Diaz led me aside. "Mallerie, you have a real gift with these kids. I'd like to recommend you for a paid coordinator role here. It's part-time, but it could really help you." My pulse jumped. "Me, a coordinator," she smiled. "They trust you, and you'll get the freedom to shape the curriculum." I tucked the clipboard under my arm. This was a new layer of risk, leaving the safety of volunteer to accept responsibility, but it felt like destiny. That afternoon, I swung by the library to check my email. Anna had sent a message, open the one titled Conference Details. My fingers trembled as I clicked. There it was. My next big test. Empower Her panel, Mallerie Harper, 6 p.m. Stage B. Below that, an attachment event schedule listing Chloe's keynote at 7 p.m. directly after me. My throat went dry. We'd be back to back, 2 sisters on the same stage. I stared at the words, "Be prepared for Q&A audience up to 200. At first, I felt a surge of dread. What if they shouted me down? But then anger flared. Chloe and Mom thought they controlled my story. Now I had the platform to turn the tables. I closed my laptop and exhaled. That evening, I set up my little office in the shelter's common room, lamp, laptop, speech notes. I practiced my opening line before the cracked window. "Good evening. My scars taught me to own my story." My voice echoed in the empty hall. The laser bruise on my forehead throbbed, a reminder of how far I'd come. As I honed each paragraph, I thought of the women at Willowbrook who braided my hair that first night, of the kids who refused to hush their writing, of Mrs. Patton's gentle praise. I embedded these faces into my speech. I drafted closing questions. "What chapter will you write next?" I rehearsed until my voice cracked, then steadied again. Just before midnight, I closed my journal and reached for my phone only to find a new TikTok notification from Chloe. A split-screen video of me at the library teaching writing, opposite a glamorous shot of her on a yacht sipping champagne. Caption, "Guess who really knows how to empower?" The comments scrolled, mocking, insulting, dismissive. My heart sank. They were trying to steal my momentum before I even spoke. I stared at that screen until my eyes blurred, then deleted the app. I set the phone face down and breathed. Tomorrow I'd let my words do the talking. I slept in fits and starts dreaming of a grand auditorium, lit like a cathedral, rows of empty seats gaping at me. I saw Chloe's silhouette at center stage, backlit, speaking to a sea of cameras. My own podium stood to the side, the microphone cold, and between us, an empty aisle. When dawn crept in, I woke with a start, the memory of that dream clinging. I gathered my speech notes and journal and stepped outside into the crisp morning. My reflection in the shelter window caught me off guard. Bruised forehead, chipped nail polish, eyes bright with purpose. I touched my bandaged brow and whispered, "This ends tonight." As I walked toward the exit, my phone buzzed with one more email from the conference organizer. "Urgent Stage B has been reassigned. Please report to Stage A at 7 p.m., new time slot 8 p.m. My chest lurched. Stage A was Chloe's venue, the main hall packed with sponsors. My talk was being moved directly before her, hidden in the shadow of her audience flow. My mind raced sabotage or mistake. I glanced back at the shelter behind me. Thin walls, safe haven, unlikely launch pad. A cold wind swept down the street. My pulse thundered. Would they steal my moment? The email glowed in my hand, a gauntlet thrown at my feet. I clenched my fists. Not a mistake, I muttered. A challenge. Stepping into the morning light, I realized the real battle hadn't begun yet, and the house that branded me useless was about to watch me rewrite every rule. But would the world even show up to witness it? Would Mallerie survive the final curveball and still command the stage? Or would Chloe's influence drown out her voice before it even rose? I stepped into the grand hallway of the conference center just after 7 p.m., the lights dimming and the murmur of an upscale crowd rising around me. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead, reflecting off polished marble floors. I clutched my speech notes, the pages slightly crumpled where my fingers had trembled. A corridor of branded banners lined the walls. Empower. Her presents each one, featuring Chloe's poised silhouette in a sleek pantsuit. My pulse thudded. Stage A was hers, not mine, and yet here I was, about to claim it. A stagehand in a navy blazer waved me forward. "Ms. Harper, you're on in 5. His voice was polite but distant, like reciting a script. I swallowed and nodded, adjusting the bandage on my forehead. In the mirror at the end of the hall, I caught my reflection. Dark-washed jeans, crisp white blouse, messy bun, revealing the faint bruise still fading to lavender. I looked nothing like a polished keynote speaker. But the bruise was my badge, my story's watermark. I rounded a corner into a small green room, cluttered with chairs and folding tables. Chloe lounged on one of them, her designer heels kicked up, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up, lips curling. "Look who's early," she said. Her tone was sugar and vinegar sweet until it cut. I forced a neutral smile. Stage time changed. She tapped her phone. "Hope you got the memo. Don't want you wandering into someone else's talk." My throat tightened. I could call her out, tell her it was her agency's blunder, but addiction to confrontation wasn't my style. Instead, I crossed my arms. "I'm ready." I pivoted to mount the small ramp leading to the backstage door. She stood blocking my path. "You know this crowd isn't here for tears. They want tips how to build a brand, monetize your pain." Her eyes flicked to my taped forehead. "Make sure you give them what they paid for." I stepped around her and into the red-carpeted hallway. The PA crackled, "Please welcome Mallerie Harper to Stage A." My heart caught. Stage A. The main hall with 500 seats, sponsors, front row tables. The doors opened into a vast theater. Rows of white chairs faced a stage framed by golden drapes and a giant Empower Her logo. Soft pink uplights bathed the floor. I stood at the threshold, swallowed by the anticipation. From the back, I spotted cameras on tripods, a live stream booth behind tinted glass, and a hush falling over the audience. I could hear Chloe's last words in my blood. "They want tips." But I didn't come to sell empowerment. I came to speak truth. I stepped forward, each footfall echoing. The lights dimmed further, a single spotlight dancing across the scarlet carpet toward me. I felt the weight of hundreds of eyes, executives in tailored suits, beauty influencers pressing record, local journalists poised with notepads. My pulse thundered. But beneath the fear, a stillness bloomed. This was my moment. I climbed the stairs, each one a test of resolve. At the podium, the microphone loomed like a judge's gavel. I placed my notes on the lectern and straightened my shoulders. A wave of silence rolled in, expectation, curiosity, maybe doubt. I took a breath, letting the hush settle around me. "Good evening," I began, my voice low but clear. The room leaned in. "I'm Mallerie Harper, and 6 months ago I was branded useless by the people who claimed to love me." A ripple of surprise murmurs fluttered like startled birds. I felt the bruise tingle, a nerve ending alive with memory. Behind me, the projector lit up on one side, Chloe's TikTok, mocking my laser removal. On the other, a photo of my writing club kids huddled in a circle, journals open, faces shining. The contrast was stark, performance versus purpose. A few in the front rows gasped. I could have hidden this. I continued tapping my bandaged forehead. I could have whispered my story in small rooms. But the scar you see isn't a sign of brokenness. It's proof of survival. My voice gained strength. I scanned the crowd. Some leaned forward, others shifted uncomfortable. A sponsor rep in the front table scribbled notes. I pivoted to the next slide, screenshots of my mother's latte-fueled taunt. "At least your forehead tells the truth," juxtaposed with an image of Willowbrook, women sharing muffins. My mother tried to brand me with shame. My sister tried to sell me as entertainment. But real empowerment isn't about spectacle. It's about community lifting each other when we're down. A woman in the third row, a hairstylist by her badge, dabbed at her eyes. The murmur became a hum of recognition. They knew abusive families. They knew fake influencers. I pressed on. I didn't come to give you viral tips or motivational slogans. I came to offer you this. Your story matters, every bruise, every broken line, every tear you think no one sees. The lights brightened slightly, revealing nods across the crowd. Then from the side wings, I saw Chloe stir, the brand influencer poised to reclaim her narrative next. Her mouth moved as though to speak into a wireless mic. The stagehand at the wings glanced backhand on Chloe's arm, but didn't stop her. My heart hammered. Was she going to interrupt, sabotage my moment? A cold sweat prickled my spine. I shifted my weight forward. When my story was on someone else's lips, I lost my voice. But tonight, I stand in mine. I raised my hand palm out like warding off the past. At that instant, Chloe's wireless mic crackled through the speakers. "Hey, excuse me, sorry, technical difficulty." Her voice, slick, surprised, echoed off the walls. A few chuckles rippled. I held my breath. I glanced toward the wings. Chloe's face was pale, fingers twitching on the mic. The host, a poised woman in a gold dress, rushed on stage beside me, whispering urgently into an earpiece. The auditorium lights flickered, and for a heartbeat, the giant Empower. Her logo behind me dimmed. The room tilted. Would this be the moment they cut my mic? Hushed my truth, I lifted my chin. The spotlight stayed locked on me. The murmur of the audience sharpened into expectation. I leaned closer to the mic and spoke over the crackle. Empowerment isn't defined by flawless delivery or lip service applause. It's named here. I tapped my forehead gently by the scars. You refuse to let define you. A swell of applause answered, polite at first, then genuine, building like a wave. I let the sound fill me. Even as technicians raced to fix the lights and Chloe's mic blinked dead, I stood unshaken. The struggle wasn't to outshine my sister, it was to outlast the noise of her world. And just as the applause rippled into a standing ovation, the projector behind me glitch-locked on a single slide, a photo of the writing club, but distorted the kids' faces, pixelated. Then the slide blinked to black. The theater lights swung off. The spotlight cut out, and I stood in sudden darkness. The auditorium plunged into silence, but for the tapping of a lone foot. For a moment, I heard only my own breath, and then a single voice called out from the dark. "What's next? Mallerie?" Would the blackout be a technical sabotage, or a sign that the power of my truth was about to shine brighter than any spotlight?